Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this week's VIN-dow with Robert Hollinshead. Bob, good day to you. And I know that you guys went through a mess down the southeast, and so let's talk about what happens post-hurricane, maybe with vehicles and other natural disasters that we see across everywhere. If we could.
Morning, everybody. Morning, Shoney. Well, it's going to be interesting. I was surprised yesterday. I thought I would have seen a big uptick in the sales outside of Florida, where Florida dealers were buying. But I didn't really see that there was an extraordinary amount of people buying. I think it's because they're still cleaning the mess up, so they're not really ready to go. But that brings up like a whole raft of circumstances, right? Where it could have a little effect on the market, where dealers that are desperate to buy stuff because they can't find it at the moment after they do get an insurance check, if they had ground up insurance, which is pretty weird. And it's very important that dealers understand that the vast majority of insurance policies don't cover ground up. In other words, sky down. A hurricane, a tree fell, it broke something. Yes, but I think what we're going to find is a whole bunch of people are going to figure out that they don't have ground up. In other words, the water started at the ground and got deeper, and your insurance don't cover you. That's something that I think is very easily overlooked on a sunny day, and it's too late when the ground starts swelling in water to find out that your world has just been set on its head. So that's a particular issue to think about. And maybe there's a large number of people that already understand that. If there isn't, and even if you're not necessarily in a place that is going to have the next hurricane, it's a really good understanding to figure out what your policy does cover. Ground up as opposed to sky down. That's a issue. Second, when we talk about a Mississippi flood, like it's going to happen sometime soon in the Midwest, it's a freshwater flood. When we talk about a Fort Myers flood, it's a saltwater flood. So what's the difference? Going way back when, there was a raft of people that used to follow floods around. Nobody followed a saltwater flood because saltwater floods immediately install ghosts in the car. So a ghost in the car is what happens a month, 6 months, 8 months, 2 years from now from the corrosion of salt water. Freshwater doesn't do the same thing. Freshwater got mud. Saltwater got salt. And what that really means is, well, anybody would know that. You dumbass, why are you saying that? Well, it's pretty simple. It's actually very simple. The vast majority of people that lost cars also lost other property. And if they don't have ground up insurance, they might not have insurance for their car. And if they don't have insurance for their car, and that car starts to dry out, now we get the hose out, or we start to take the seats out and we start to clean the car in order to actually trade it or sell it. Zip codes on titles start to become kind of an important little flag to pay attention to. Not that we're trying to harm anybody, not that we would ever, not want everybody to get their insurance money and all the rest of it. But if you're in a situation and you had a car, 20 cars, 100 cars go down for the count, and maybe the water only got to the floorboard, or maybe just made it to the seat, never got in the dash. Salt water ghost has already been introduced to the vehicle, right? Now, what that means is zip codes on the titles, right? Now, if it's a car that was not owned by an individual, that can be difficult unless it's a zip code to the location where the owner of the vehicle happened to be. But the reason why this is kind of an important thing, and maybe somebody with nefarious intent would go ahead and flip the title or something to a different zip. But cars that are actually went down for this event are not going to get sold in Florida. They're going to wind up in, Indiana or Arkansas or someplace going to an auction where it's a sunny day. It might even be cold out, but you're not going to be thinking about a flood because an awful lot of them cars can be, take everything apart, clean everything, but the ghost remains in the car. In other words, that corrosion of the salt water is going to pop its nose up in the power windows, in the power seats, in the all over the place, in the navigate, all of the little electronic. Oh yes, without any question or doubt. So this is not something that we're going to just stop doing business about. It's an awareness circumstance of understanding what the possibilities are and paying attention to what you would call a potential issue. On the other side of that, I think what we're going to find is in the next couple of days, weeks, or month or two, I don't think there was hundreds of thousands of cars lost, but there's probably 40 or 50. That's just a pure guess, has nothing to do with statistics. But that definitely creates there's differences in buyers when you separate who a buyer is, if they're buying because they feel like buying, or if they're necessity buyers. Necessity buyers are people that typically are not good negotiators, because it's kind of like going to the grocery store when you're hungry. It's potato chips. It's all sorts of things. You never, ever would dream of buying if you weren't hungry. So a necessity buyer, in the case of a car, is really looking for the ability to buy. If they got an insurance check, there's not going to be a lot of negotiating going on. There really isn't. If they have to get to work and there's not a lot of cars there to buy, you could sell them a Hyundai when they thought they were going to buy a Toyota. So the necessity factor, specifically to that little 3-4 county area, I think is going to cause a little bit of a, maybe it's 8 or 9 counties. It's going to cause a little bit of a necessity circumstance where if a dealer has inventory, it's not going to be quite like COVID, but it's going to be very close. You're going to be able to sell just about anything to anybody. So what will that do in the general market? Well, when you think about it, if there is, even if there's 100,000 cars affected, and you look at how many cars are actually wholesaled around the country on a given week, I'm not saying it's a drop in the bucket, but it's definitely not going to have a fundamental effect on, like rental car companies bidding on every car when they did. That had a different fundamental effect than I think what's going to happen with this. So just a general observation in terms of what we have going on. We feel bad for everybody that was affected by it. It's a disaster. I was on the phone yesterday with a couple of dealers that we actually buy and sell cars to down there, that it's it's just something you don't need, man. It's extra stress. It's extra for everybody, for employees, for desperate consumers, it's a mess, and it's going to take a couple minutes to get over it. But simultaneous to that, the last time we saw this was with Sandy, where one of the history reports was pegging. I remember this distinctly. Pegging their reports with zip code warnings, and we lost all our buyers in Chicago and Minnesota and Kansas City because they all went into panic because the history report destroyed the value of our cars, even though they had absolutely nothing to do with Sandy. So I have a funny feeling that the same thing may occur. I think they open themselves up to tremendous liability for disparaging other people's assets. That it's kind of like calling somebody a child molester. Like it's hard to say you're not when a history report says that this is from an affected area. I don't know how you, I don't know how you actually refute that. But if you got a lot of inventory from that particular area, so say for instance they do that in South Florida or mid Florida, and you didn't even get like have any kind of problem with any kind of ground up situation of a flood, right? What do you do about your inventory? I mean that is a definite potential mess. And again, I don't know what the call to action is there, but I'm just saying from a point of awareness, it's probably not a bad idea that we got this on the back of the brain someplace. Does that make any sense to you, Sean?
Yeah, it's really so. But how does the buyer in, say, Arkansas, how does he know that there's a ghost in that car?
Well, say when I'm saying Arkansas, I'm talking about where I'm saying Indiana, I'm saying that's where those cars actually will get shipped to be sold. You follow me? As when they're going to salvage sales, the probability they're getting sold right in Florida, I think, is relatively low. And I misstated if I didn't make that clear. It's when they get aggregated in a marketplace, and you're looking at a 2019 Rolls-Royce Wraith. That they're announcing damage, but what kind of damage? That car would be destroyed for life if God came to repair it. There's no possibility of ever getting that car right. So it's and that's at a wholesaler or a buyer's level. That's not at a retailer or a trade-in circumstance. The place I think you're going to see these cars popping up is a person that's car that went underwater. They're not in a position to either have insurance or they're not covered for a flood, or their insurance company, for one reason or another, is not going to pay them for the car. They're going to dry that sucker out, and they're going to go trade it in. And if it was in those zip codes, and it looks like it's a clean everything, clean title, and the car seems to still run because the saltwater ghost hasn't eaten it yet. I think it's not a bad idea to actually have that in your mind. Does that make any sense to you, friend?
Yeah, got it. No, that makes a lot of sense. So it's where the cars are going to aggregate outside of the state is.
I believe so.
It's going to rear its ugly head.
I believe it's where you could get caught. You could get caught on something here or there, and it's just a question of keeping it in the frontal lobe, where you need it like a hole in the head to get hammered with something when you're not actually paying attention when you could. That's all.